Chapter 2. The measure of amenability to planetary vibrations. When judging a horoscope, it is of prime importance that we take into consideration the social and racial standing of the individual. For configurations which are of great significance in the horoscope of an educated Caucasian may mean little or nothing in the figure of a Chinese coolie, and vice versa. Neglect of this factor would inevitably lead to false conclusions, as we shall now explain. It is a mystic maxim that the lower in the scale of evolution a being is placed, the more certainly it responds to the planetary rays. And conversely, the higher we ascend in the scale of attainment, the more the man conquers and rules his stars, freeing himself from the leading strings of the divine hierarchies. This yoke was not, however, placed upon man in order to restrain him needlessly, but just as we, in our ordinary life, restrain a child from doing things in ignorance, which would hurt it and maybe cripple it for life, so also are we restrained by the divine hierarchies through the planetary aspects in such a manner that we do not hurt ourselves beyond recovery in the experiences of life. But coupled with this guidance, there is, of course, the measure of free will, which grows as we evolve. The child in our midst has really very little free will, being subject not only to its parents, but to the servants, if such there be in the household, and to everybody with whom it is associated, all exercising control over it for its own good. As the child grows, this measure of restraint is by degrees relaxed, and in the course of years, the child will learn to exercise its free will. This method has been followed by the divine hierarchies in the case of man. Infant humanity was absolutely guided by divine rules without having any will at all. Thus shalt thou do or not do were injunctions laid upon them which must be implicitly obeyed. Otherwise, the divine displeasure was at once shown by such strenuous manifestations as appealed to infant humanity's mind, namely, lightning, thunder, earthquakes, and great visitations of plagues. This was for their collective guidance. For individual restraint there were strict laws, commandments, and ordinances. Tribute must be paid continually to the divine leader and offered up on the altar as sacrifices. And for every offense against the law, a certain sacrifice of material goods must be made. Fear was the dominant keynote of that dispensation, for the fear of the Lord is the beginning of righteousness. This regime was carried on under the planetary conditions of Mars and the Moon. Mars, being the home of the dominant Lucifer spirits, gave to mankind the energy necessary that evolution may be accomplished. This martial energy was of the very greatest importance, particularly, of course, in the earlier stages. The Moon, which is the home of the angels, under their divine leader Jehovah, gave to infant humanity that childlike brain mind, which is amenable to rulership, and bends itself readily before authority. These with Saturn were the only planetary rays which affected mankind as a whole during the Lemurian epoch, and if a horoscope were erected for any of the people who lived then, it would be unnecessary to enter the places of the other planets, because they could not respond to their rays. Even today, a great part of mankind has not evolved very far beyond that point. A large class, particularly among those we speak of as the lower races, and even the lower classes of our Western world, being dominated principally by these planetary rays. Under their impulses, they act with automatic certainty in a specific manner, and it is possible to predict exactly what they will do under a certain aspect of these planets, because they live entirely in their emotions and are scarcely, if at all, responsive to the intellectual vibrations of Mercury. Neither can they appreciate such emotions as signified by Venus or its octave, Uranus. They respond solely to the lower nature, the animal passions. They move under the impulses of Mars and the Moon respecting sex and sustenance. Their pleasures are of the lowest and most sensual nature. They live like animals altogether in the physical, and their creed is, eat, drink, and be merry. Their desires run chiefly to wine and women, for they have not as yet awakened to the charm of song. Neither has beauty had a chance to enchant the savage heart at this stage of development, for that comes from the Venus rays which are beyond such people. Woman is to the man of that stage only a beast of burden and a convenience. Meanwhile, Father Time, represented by the planet Saturn, keeps the score, and wields over them the whiplash of necessity to drive them forward on this evolutionary path. meting out to each the fruits of his labor at the harvest time between lives. When the man has cultivated the savage virtues of bravery, physical endurance, etc., he dreams in the post-mortem existence of new fields to conquer, and sees where he was lacking and why his desires were frustrated because of lack of implements. Gradually, the constructive Martial ray and the Saturn cunning fertilize the lunar brain which he is building, so that in time he learns to make the crude implements necessary for the attainment of his primitive ambitions. Even today, we see the same cunning traits of character, the same crude crafts displayed in and by the lower races for the purpose of irrigating land, mining ores, or milling grain. All those earliest implements were the result of the planetary rays of Saturn, Moon, and Mars impinging on the primitive brain of infant humanity.